It's time for the Fantasy Grill. I'm Anthony K. You can find me at sports_fluent, wherever you go on social media, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and of course on the Fired Up Network. You can reach me and send your questions to anthonyk@sportsfluent.com. Kicking off this week on the Fantasy Grill, we've got a versus challenge. So it's a start, sit versus challenge. We're going to take you through 3 quarterback, a running back, and a wide receiver, a start, sit challenge. And then I'm going to tell you some waiver wire pickups that you probably should pick up if you haven't already. Let's kick it off with the verses. In the QB edition, we have Tom Brady, the GOAT, Tampa Bay, facing the Kansas City Chiefs versus the surprise of the season, the Jags, of course, but I mean Trevor Lawrence and the Jags, who are at the Philadelphia Eagles. Here's the thing. If I had to pick one for the entire season, my pick might be a little bit, it would be different. I'm not even going to lie. It would be different. I'm going with the youngster. However, it's for this week, for week 4. So my pick is going to be Tom Brady. Why is it going to be Tom Brady? Well, really 3 reasons. Mainly 1, he's getting Mike Evans back, and he's going against a Kansas City defense that, don't be fooled, is a pretty good fantasy defense. But I think after the game they had against the Packers last week, you're going to see Tom Brady kind of get back to his old ways. Now, not only is he getting Mike Evans back, rumor has it Chris Godwin and Julio Jones are going to be back. And that was the thing that handcuffed them last week against the Packers. So you give me Tom Brady with that running game, with Mike Evans, with Chris Godwin, with Julio Jones, and I'm comparing him to Trevor Lawrence, who has looked good, but he's going into a very, very good, if not the best defense in the league, the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia. They're giving up an average of 11.59 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. That is not a situation I want to be in. So when it comes down to the verses between Tom Brady and Trevor Lawrence this week, I'm going with Tom Brady. Okay. All right, the next one at the running back position, we're going to San Francisco, and it's Jeff Wilson versus Breece Hall of the New York Jets. So here we go. We've got Wilson, who's going up against the Rams. The Rams give up about 11.7 points per game to running backs. Breece Hall is going into Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, not great against the run. 51% of the snaps last week for the Jets went to Bryce Hall. So if I have to pick between Bryce Hall and Jeff Wilson, who's going up against a stingy Rams defense against the run, I'm going with Hall gets the start. Wilson sitting on the bench. That's our running backs. Lastly, this is my favorite. You know, wide receivers are my favorite position, especially when we talk about PPRs. So we've got a guy who's on, I want to say, almost all of my fantasy teams. Chris Olave of the Saints going up against Russell Gage. Russell Gage last week, 24.7 points, had a big one. He's going, obviously his Bucks are going up against the Chiefs. Olave is going up against Minnesota. Both are home games for Olave and Gage. Well, technically, Olave's playing in London against the Vikings. Here's my issue, and I just mentioned it like 4 seconds ago. Russell Gage is on the Bucks. The Bucks, if they do get Evans, I feel like I've said this already, Julio Jones, and Chris Godwin back in the lineup, Gage's numbers are going to take a huge hit. Mike Evans alone, who will be back after his 1-game suspension, is going to take a huge chunk out of Gage's opportunities, out of his targets. So this one's actually a pretty easy one. Lock in Chris Olave. Now we go to the waiver wire, and this is, listen, I told you this when you drafted. I told you this before the season started. I said, listen, the draft is important. Don't get me wrong. You want to do your homework. You want to stick to your plan. You want to load up on those running backs and wide receivers. Pick a quarterback late. All those tips that I gave you. But the one thing, if you remember that I said was, make sure you understand that, especially if you're playing in a money league, the waiver wire, what you do throughout the season is as important, if not more important, than the team that you draft. So, did you listen to that advice? Well, let's see. Here's what you should be doing this week. We had big weeks. I mentioned Trevor Lawrence already, had a big week. Khalil Herbert of the Bears, he was your number one scoring running back. Pretty good. Chicago Bears. Let's give him a moment of silence. All right. Then you had Adam Thielen putting up more numbers than Justin Jefferson. And the 49ers defense outscored Russell Wilson in an 11-10 snore fest. Oh, boy, that was a bad game. Crickets never shut up. All right, so what do we do? Waiver wire, quarterbacks. These are guys who aren't rostered in most leagues. So listen, there's people who stream quarterbacks. Perhaps you have a quarterback that just hasn't been performing as well as you thought because you waited late to take one. Trevor Lawrence, only rostered in 42% of leagues. He's a good one to pick up. Maybe you're in a super flex. Marcus Mariota, only rostered in 29% of leagues. And people are sleeping on Marcus Mariota because, well, listen, he's not a very good quarterback. He doesn't throw the ball very much. His team's not very good. So, Fluent, what are you telling me? Why would I take Marcus Mariota? Because he runs the ball. And I told you this. He runs the ball. He has a touchdown, a rushing touchdown which are worth, that's a tough sentence for me to say, a rushing touchdown, which we all know are worth more than passing touchdowns. So he can do it with his legs. He's going to get you a couple in the air. Marcus Mariota, if you need to have someone back there, perhaps you have Mac Jones and you're worried about injury. Perhaps you've had Derek Carr and he hasn't been great. Perhaps you took a chance on Carson Wentz. Well, here is the fix, at least for the short term. All right, moving on to the running back position. I already said his name. He was the top scorer for running backs last week. The Chicago Bears don't do much right, but what they have been doing this season is rush the ball exceptionally well. I know David Montgomery is the RB1 on the team. However, they run the ball so much that Herbert is worth it in fantasy. And he got a little bit injured, David Montgomery, that is, in week 3. So look for Herbert to pick up some more snaps. If Montgomery, especially if he misses any time, Herbert is a very good pickup for your team. I already mentioned from the wide receiver position. I already mentioned Chris Olave. I only bring him up. I know a lot of places have him rostered, but 63%, which means just under 40% of leagues he's not rostered. So take a look. If he's there, you can give the old to your fantasy opponents that they haven't figured it out to pick him up. So you can go pick him up. Other than that, I'm going to go to Green Bay. We've been trying to figure out what's going on in Green Bay. Who is going to be the wide receiver that you want to pick up? Is it Watson? Is it Lazard? Is it Dobbs? I'm going to go with Dobbs. I said Dobbs. I meant Dobbs. I always say last names wrong. I think you know that about me. But I'm going with Dobbs. Lazard is probably picked up in most leagues, but only 4% have Dobbs. So he should be available for you to pick up. Go with Dobbs. As always, send your questions to anthonyk@sportsfluent.com. Hit me up in the comments. Of course, follow on Twitter, IG, and TikTok at sports_fluent. Until next week, now you're more fluent.